Sam lived on the edge of a small town where houses were new, lawns were neat, and rules were strict. He was not a man who liked rules. For many years he had lived quietly on his land, looking after his small barn, his chickens, and a few goats. The barn was old, but it had a charm that reminded him of his father. To Sam, the barn was more than just wood and nails. It was part of his life. The trouble began when new houses started rising around his land. A group of people formed a homeowners association, better known as the HOA. At first, Sam did not pay them much attention. He was busy with his animals and his garden. But soon, letters started to arrive. The HOA demanded that Sam paint his fence white. They told him his grass was too long. They even said the red roof of his barn did not match the style of the neighborhood. Sam laughed at first. He thought it was silly that anyone would care about the color of his barn. But the letters kept coming. Every week there was a new complaint. Sometimes it was about his goats making noise. Other times it was about the smell of hay. Sam tried to explain that his land had always been there before the new houses. The barn had stood for decades, long before the HOA existed, but no one wanted to listen. The head of the HOA was a man named Mr. Hill. He wore a suit even when he was just walking down the street. His shoes were always shiny, and he spoke as if he was the mayor of the town. Mr. Hill did not like Sam's barn. He said it made the whole neighborhood look poor. To him, the barn was nothing but an eyesore. One summer morning, Sam stood outside, his barn sipping coffee. The sunrise painted the sky in shades of orange. The animals stirred, and the sound of chickens clucking filled the air. For Sam, it was a perfect morning. But the peace was broken when a group of cars stopped at the end of his driveway. Out came Mr. Hill and a few other HOA members. "Sam," Mr. Hill said, walking with authority, "we've given you warnings. This barn must go. It does not fit our community standards." Sam frowned. "This barn was here before your houses, before your rules. It's part of my land, and I'm not tearing it down." Mr. Hill's eyes narrowed. "You have ignored us for too long. You'll hear from our lawyers. The barn will not stand much longer." They left as quickly as they came, but the word stayed with Sam. He knew they meant trouble. That night, Sam sat by the barn door, running his hand across the old wood. Memories came back of when he was a boy, watching his father build it plank by plank. It had survived storms and winters, yet now it faced a new enemy. Not nature, but people who valued rules more than history. Weeks passed, and the fight grew worse. More letters arrived. Fines were added to his name. Strangers walked by his land and whispered about the ugly barn. Sam kept working with his animals, but a shadow of worry followed him. The HOA was not giving up. One day, he overheard two men in town. They were talking about the big resort the HOA had built near the lake. The resort was their pride, with shining glass windows, golf courses, and boats lined neatly by the shore. It brought in money and gave them power. As Sam listened, a thought quietly formed in his mind, though he pushed it away for now. Back home, the barn stood tall against the evening sky. Sam leaned on his shovel, staring at it. "They want to take you down," he whispered to the barn. "But they don't know me." The barn creaked as if answering him. For Sam, it was not just a fight about wood and paint. It was about respect. And deep inside, he knew the HOA had just started a battle they would regret. After the first confrontation, Sam thought the HOA might leave him alone. He had hoped that maybe they would see the barn as part of the history of the land. But hope did not last long. The HOA grew bolder and stricter with each passing day. Every morning, Sam found a new notice pinned to his mailbox or slipped under his door. One letter said his barn doors were the wrong size. Another claimed the color of the hay in his barn was unsightly. There were rules now about the number of chickens a person could own. Sam shook his head in disbelief. The community he had once enjoyed now felt like a prison. Mr. Hill seemed to enjoy these battles. He came to Sam's property several times, walking through the yard with a notebook, taking pictures and writing down every little thing he found. He told Sam that everything he did must be approved by the HOA. Sam tried to reason with Him. I am not asking for trouble, I just want to live my life here. The barn is part of my home. Mr. Hill smiled in a cold way. Rules are rules. Everyone must follow them, Sam. If you cannot comply, we will take further action. That phrase, further action, made Sam uneasy. He didn't know exactly what the HOA could do, but it felt like a threat. The tension in the town also grew. Neighbors who once waved at Sam started avoiding him. Some whispered that he was a troublemaker. Others seemed afraid to even speak to him. The HOA had influence, and it was clear they were using it to isolate him. One afternoon, Sam went to the local hardware store to buy nails for his barn. The clerk looked at him nervously. Mr. Hill said you might cause trouble, he said quietly. Just be careful. Sam thanked him but felt a mix of anger and sadness. His own neighbors were turning against him because of the HOA's power. Back at his barn, Sam worked silently. He fixed a broken beam, cleaned the stalls, and fed the animals. His goats followed him as he walked, sensing his mood. The barn was alive with the sounds of his hard work, a small world of peace in a town that no longer understood him. One day, Sam found a notice on his barn door that shocked him. It was official this time. The HOA had decided that his barn was unsafe and ordered it to be demolished within 30 days. Sam felt his heart tighten. His barn, which had survived storms and time, was now threatened by paper and signatures. He looked around at the animals, the old wooden walls, and the memories held in every plank. This was not just a building. It was a symbol of his life and independence. He knew he could not simply watch it disappear. That night he sat outside the barn under the stars, thinking. The air was cool, and the sounds of the lake nearby filled the silence. He remembered what he had overheard about the HOA's resort. The lake, the boats, the expensive property. It was all part of the same group that wanted to take his barn away. Sam began to understand that the HOA was not just about rules, it was about control. They used their power to push people like him out. He could fight them in court, but he suspected it would take years. Meanwhile, the barn might be gone. He went inside the barn and ran his hand across the old beams. They want to destroy this place, he said softly. But I will not give up so easily. They don't know who I am yet. For the first time, Sam began to consider a plan. He would not act recklessly, but he would find a way to protect what was his. He started looking around the property, noticing every detail, every tool, every gate, and even the way water flowed across the land became part of his thoughts. As the moon rose over the lake, Sam felt a quiet determination. The battle was no longer just about a barn. It was about respect, fairness, and standing up to those who used power without conscience. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a small spark of an idea began to grow. A way to show the HOA that their control had limits, and that sometimes the quietest person could turn the tables in ways no one expected. The morning was quiet and cool. Sam woke to the sounds of birds singing and the soft rustle of leaves in the wind. He went outside to check on his animals, as he did every day. The chickens pecked at the ground, and the goats moved slowly toward the barn for breakfast. Everything seemed normal, but Sam felt a strange tension in the air. As he approached the barn, Sam froze. The doors were wide open, swinging in the breeze. His heart sank. Something was wrong. He ran toward the barn and saw a group of men standing. Inside, they wore uniforms marked with the HOA logo. "Stop, what are you doing?" Sam shouted, his voice echoing through the yard. One of the men holding a clipboard looked up calmly. "We are here to remove the structure. The HOA ordered it to be demolished. You had 30 days and that time is up." Sam felt a wave of anger. "This barn has stood for decades. You can't just destroy it." The men ignored him and began working quickly. They pulled planks apart, smashed the old roof, and removed the beams. Sam tried to stop them, but there were too many of them. He could only watch as the barn that had been his sanctuary, his family's legacy, and the home for his animals was torn down. Tears formed in Sam's eyes. The smell of splintered wood filled the air. The animals made noises of distress. Sam's heart ached. He had tried to follow the rules, he had tried to reason with Mr. Hill, but nothing had worked. The HOA had acted without mercy. When the last beam fell, Sam stood silently, staring at the pile of broken wood. For a moment, he felt powerless, as if the world had turned against him. But then a slow, deep anger began to rise inside him. This was not just about the barn anymore. It was about respect, fairness, and the arrogance of people who thought rules gave them the right to destroy someone else's life. Sam walked around the remains, touching the splintered wood. Memories flashed in his mind, working with his father, feeding the animals, laughing under the roof during storms. All of it was gone, taken by people who did not care about history or hard work. He sat down on the ground, looking at the ruins. As he thought, a small idea began to take shape. He remembered the lake and the big resort that the HOA had built nearby. The water, the boats, the money, it all belonged to them, and they used it to show off their power. But water could be controlled. Lakes had valves, gates, and systems that directed the flow. Sam's mind worked quickly. He did not want to hurt anyone, but he wanted to make a point. If the HOA could take away his barn, he could show them that their wealth and pride were not untouchable. He began to remember stories of old farms, of irrigation systems, and of lakes being drained for maintenance. The thought of a valve, hidden and forgotten, gave him a spark of hope. After a long moment, Sam stood. His anger had shifted into focus. He would not let this end with a destroyed barn. He would find a way to act, to protect himself, and to teach the HOA a lesson about overconfidence. That night, Sam walked along the edge of the HOA's property. From a distance, he could see the shining windows of the resort, the well-kept grounds, and the lake reflecting the moonlight. He felt a quiet determination. The barn was gone, but Sam's resolve had only grown stronger. He whispered to himself, "If they think they can take everything, they are wrong. They will learn that rules cannot replace respect. They will see that the smallest person can make a difference." As Sam returned to his property, the broken barn behind him, he began to make a plan. He would study the lake, the resort, and everything the HOA relied on. He would be careful, patient, and clever. Revenge, he realized, did not have to be loud or violent. It could be smart, precise, and unforgettable. For the first time since the destruction, Sam felt a sense of control returning. The barn had been taken, but his spirit remained. And soon, the HOA would discover that underestimating him was their greatest mistake. After the barn was destroyed, Sam spent several days in quiet thought. He worked on his property, repaired fences, and fed his animals. The anger in his heart had not faded, but it had transformed into determination. He knew he had to find a way to respond to the HOA, but he wanted his actions to be clever, not reckless. One afternoon, Sam decided to walk along the edge of the HOA's resort property. From a distance, he observed the sparkling lake, the boats tied neatly to the docks, and the manicured gardens surrounding the luxurious buildings. The resort was impressive, but it had one weakness that Sam began to notice. At the far end of the lake, near the maintenance building, he saw a small structure partially hidden by trees. Pipes ran from the lake into the building, and a metal gate valve protruded slightly from the ground. Sam had studied farms and irrigation systems as a boy with his father, and he instantly recognized the setup. The valve controlled the flow of water in and out of the lake. It could lower the water level if opened, though it required knowledge and care. For the next few days, Sam watched carefully. He took note of the guards, the schedule of maintenance workers, and the layout of the property. The valve was rarely checked, and the area around it was quiet for most of the day. It was clear that no one thought it could be misused. Sam returned home each evening, thinking about the possibilities. He did not want to destroy the lake or hurt anyone. His goal was to send a message. The HOA had taken his barn, and now it was time for them to understand that rules and wealth did not make them untouchable. Late one night, Sam made a plan. He would approach the valve during a time when the area was empty. He would open it carefully, slowly letting the water flow out through the connected channels. He calculated that it would take hours for the lake to lower enough to make a dramatic impact, but he had patience. He also prepared tools, ropes, and a small boat to monitor the process safely. The night before he planned to act, Sam walked by the ruins of his barn. He touched the broken wood and whispered, "This is for all the work and care I have given. They will see that they cannot destroy someone's life without consequence." The moon reflected in his eyes, and for the first time since the barn had fallen, a sense of hope warmed him. The next morning, Sam arrived near the hidden maintenance area. He moved quietly, avoiding the paths where guards might walk. The metal gate valve was cold under his hands but sturdy. He tested it carefully. It moved smoothly. He smiled to himself. Everything was ready. As he prepared to open it fully, Sam paused. This was not just about revenge. It was about respect, about showing that power should be balanced with fairness. He wanted the HOA to understand that taking from someone weaker had consequences, even if the person seemed ordinary. With a deep breath, Sam began to turn the valve slowly. Water began to flow out of the lake, moving through the channels he had studied. He stayed hidden, watching as the lake level lowered gradually. The boats tilted on their sides and the sparkling water shrank toward the center. The resort building still gleamed in the sunlight, but the lake, their pride, was shrinking before their eyes. Sam did not rush. He worked patiently, carefully, making sure the process was controlled. He imagined Mr. Hill's face when he discovered the water disappearing. The thought brought a small smile to his face. He was not reckless, but he was in control. The HOA would soon understand that no one could bully someone like him without consequences. Hours passed, and the lake continued to lower. Sam watched, the boat sit awkwardly on the mud, the docks tilting and the water's edge retreating. His plan was working exactly as he had imagined. This was not destruction. It was precision. It was a lesson in patience, intelligence, and justice. As the sun began to set, Sam stepped back from the valve. He had done enough for now. The lake had been drained enough to send a clear message, and the HOA would soon have to face the results of their arrogance. For Sam, the barn was gone, but his spirit remained stronger than ever. Sam spent the next few days carefully preparing for the final stage of his plan. After discovering the secret valve, he realized that patience and observation were his greatest tools. He did not want to rush. One wrong move could attract attention, and that would ruin everything. Each morning he walked along the edge of his property, thinking about the layout of the HOA resort and the lake. He imagined the paths the guards took, the times when the workers checked the lake, and the areas that were rarely watched. He drew a small map in his notebook, marking every detail he could remember. Sam knew that knowledge was power, and he planned to use it carefully. Sam also gathered supplies. He brought gloves, ropes, and a small toolkit. He needed to make sure that the valve could be opened without any problems. He tested his tools quietly near his property, imagining how he would work under the cover of trees and shadows. Every detail mattered, and Sam wanted everything to go smoothly. At the same time, he thought about the message he wanted to send. This was not about anger or revenge alone. It was about showing that those who used power unfairly could be challenged. The HOA had destroyed his barn, but that did not mean they could continue to dominate others without consequences. One evening, as the sun began to set, Sam watched the lake from a distance. The water reflected the colors of the sky, and the resort buildings looked perfect from afar. But he noticed small details that most people would miss. The slight leaks near the valve, the channels that could carry the water out, and the empty maintenance schedules. Everything confirmed that his plan could work if he acted carefully. That night, Sam went to the remains of his barn and sat on a broken beam. He ran his hand over the old wood and thought about his father. "They took this from me," he said, quietly. "But they cannot take my mind or my skill. They will see that patience and thought are stronger than rules alone." The next day, Sam decided it was time to move. He waited until the guards left for their routine patrol and the workers were at the other end of the resort. The area near the valve was empty. Sam moved silently through the trees, staying low and careful. His heart beat faster, but his hands were steady. When he reached the valve, he paused to make sure no one could see him. The metal was cool under his hands. He tested it, turning it slightly and watching as a small amount of water began to flow through the channels. It worked perfectly. He smiled quietly to himself. Sam knew he could not finish the job all at once. The lake was large and it would take hours to lower it enough to make an impact. He planned to work in stages, turning the valve slowly and monitoring the flow. He wanted to make sure everything was controlled and safe. This was not about destruction. It was about making a statement. As he worked, he thought about the HOA members and how they would react. He imagined Mr. Hill discovering the empty docks and the tilted boats. He imagined the workers trying to understand what had happened. The thought made him feel a quiet satisfaction. This was clever, precise, and fair. He was not harming anyone, but he was showing them that unfair actions had consequences. Hours passed as Sam carefully adjusted the valve. He stayed hidden, watching the water flow out through the channels. The lake began to lower gradually, revealing muddy banks and grounded boats. From a distance it looked chaotic, but for Sam it was the perfect execution of his plan. As evening approached, Sam finally stepped back. He had done enough for the day. The lake had lowered enough to send a strong message to the HOA. He retreated, to the safety of his property, feeling a sense of accomplishment. The barn was gone, but Sam had turned his loss into strategy. He had acted with patience, intelligence, and care. The HOA had taken his property, but he had found a way to show them that their power was not absolute. That night, Sam lay in his small cabin near the farm and smiled. The next steps would come, but for now he had set the stage for a lesson the HOA would never forget. The next morning, Sam woke early. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a golden glow across his property. Today was the day he would complete his plan. The barn was gone, but his determination had never been stronger. He packed his tools, ropes, and a small notebook. Every step had been planned carefully, and he intended to follow it to the letter. He moved quietly through the trees toward the maintenance area near the lake. The guards were absent and the workers were still at the far end of the resort. Sam's heart beat steadily. He knew patience was important, but so was precision. One mistake could ruin everything. When he reached the valve, he knelt and studied it. The metal felt solid and the mechanism moved smoothly. He turned it slightly and water began to flow through the channels. Slowly, the lake's level began to drop. Boats leaned awkwardly on the mud, and the docks tilted as the water shrank away from them. Sam smiled quietly. His plan was working exactly as he had imagined. He worked carefully, adjusting the valve in small increments. He stayed hidden behind the trees, watching the resort from a distance. The buildings glimmered in the sunlight, but the lake, their pride and symbol of wealth, was shrinking. Sam felt a sense of calm control. This was not destruction, it was a message. Hours passed. Sam monitored the water closely, making small adjustments as needed. The lake continued to drain, revealing muddy banks and grounded boats. The HOA members began to notice. From the resort windows, people were pointing at the water and talking in confusion. Sam stayed patient, letting them observe without knowing what was happening. By mid-afternoon, the lake had lowered enough to make a visible impact. Boats rested awkwardly on the muddy bottom, and the waterline had retreated far from the docks. Workers rushed to inspect the area, and guards ran toward the shore. The HOA members were shocked. They had never imagined anyone could manipulate the lake so easily. Sam stayed hidden, watching their reactions. He felt a quiet satisfaction. The HOA had taken his barn, but now their pride, their lake, and their symbol of control were at his mercy. He had acted with intelligence and patience, not anger. The lesson he wanted to teach was clear. Power used unfairly could be challenged. He continued to work slowly, letting more water flow out. The lake's surface dropped steadily, and the resort appeared vulnerable in a way no one had expected. Sam made sure the flow remained controlled, ensuring no one was harmed. This was not about destruction. It was about demonstrating fairness and cleverness. By evening, the lake had drained almost entirely. Boats rested on the mud, docks leaned, and the waterline had receded dramatically. The HOA members were frantic, trying to understand what had happened. Sam quietly retreated to the trees, observing their confusion and growing panic. They were powerful, but they had been outsmarted. As the sun set, Sam finally walked away. His plan had succeeded beyond his expectations. He had shown the HOA that their control had limits. The barn was gone, but his strategy had proven that patience, intelligence, and courage could turn the tables. Back at his property, Sam sat on a small hill overlooking his land. The animals moved quietly around him. He smiled, knowing that the fight was not over, but the first major step had been taken. The HOA had learned in the clearest way possible that taking unfair advantage of someone else could have consequences. For Sam, this victory was not just about revenge. It was about respect, fairness, and showing that clever thinking could outmatch arrogance. He had lost his barn, but he had gained a powerful lesson in strategy. The night was calm, stars shone above, and the lake, though drained, reflected the orange glow of the sunset in its shallow pools. Sam whispered to himself, "They will never underestimate me again, and from now on they will think twice before taking what is not theirs." The morning after the lake had drained, the HOA members were in full chaos. Workers and guards scrambled along the muddy shore, trying to figure out how the water had vanished. Boats leaned awkwardly, docks tilted at strange angles, and the lake, their greatest pride, looked nothing like the perfect image they had shown to the town. Mr. Hill paced back and forth, his shiny shoes sinking slightly into the mud. He looked angry and confused at the same time. "How is this possible?" he shouted. "This lake cannot drain itself. Someone must be responsible." The workers checked valves, gates, and pumps, but they could not understand how the water had moved without their knowledge. The resort, which had always been a symbol of control and pride for the HOA, was now a scene of embarrassment. The townspeople had begun to notice. Some came to the edge of the property to watch. Murmurs spread quickly about the strange event at the resort. Meanwhile, Sam watched from a distance. He stayed hidden behind the trees, observing the panic and confusion. He felt a calm satisfaction. He had not caused destruction, but he had made a powerful statement. The HOA had destroyed his barn, but now they understood that clever thinking and determination could challenge even the most powerful groups. Sam knew he had to remain careful. He did not want to be seen. He had done enough to teach the lesson, and any further action could draw attention. From his vantage point, he could see the HOA members arguing and blaming each other. Their arrogance had blinded them, and now they were facing the consequences. By midday, the lake had drained to its lowest point. The water flowed steadily through the channels, controlled by the valve that Sam had studied for days. Workers were exhausted, trying to redirect the water, but it was clear that no one had expected this. The resort looked vulnerable, and the HOA's image had been shaken. Sam returned to his property quietly. The farm felt peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos at the resort. His animals moved around him, sensing his calm. For the first time in weeks, Sam felt a sense of relief and accomplishment. The fight was not over entirely, but he had achieved a significant victory. Later that evening, Sam walked along the edge of his land, looking at the ruins of his barn. The sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. Though the barn was gone, he felt no bitterness. He had lost a building, but he had gained respect for himself and for the idea that fairness and intelligence could overcome arrogance. In the town, the news spread quickly. People talked about the drained lake, the tilted boats, and the HOAs. Panic. Sam remained quiet, letting his actions speak louder than words. The townspeople began to see the truth, that the HOA, though powerful, was not untouchable. Even the most confident and arrogant people could be challenged by someone clever and determined. Mr. Hill and his group eventually restored the lake, but the lesson remained. They had underestimated Sam, and they had learned that their power had limits. Sam did not seek revenge beyond the demonstration. He had made his point clearly and fairly, showing that intelligence, patience, and courage could outmatch even those with money and influence. As night fell, Sam sat on a small hill near his cabin. The stars shone brightly above, and a cool breeze moved across his property. He thought about the barn, the lake, and the HOA. He had faced loss and turned it into an opportunity to teach a lesson without harming anyone. Sam smiled. His barn was gone, but his spirit had not been broken. He had defended his life, his principles, and his dignity. The HOA had learned that rules and wealth did not give them the right to destroy someone's life. The lesson was clear, and it had been delivered with patience and intelligence. Finally, Sam stood and looked at the stars. He whispered to himself, "They will never forget this. And I will never forget that clever thinking and patience can overcome any obstacle." With that, he walked back to his cabin, ready to continue his life stronger, wiser, and proud of the way he had turned loss into victory.